Conservatives say they want to privatize virtually everything the government does, but can that free market spirit go too far? I'm Scott Ott with Bill Whittle and Stephen Green, and this is your members only Right Angle, brought to you by you. So here's the deal, men. In the Washington Post, they brought us a story of a small town in Indiana that might well sell its water system to a private company in order to pay off a lot of debt and to eliminate the perceived need, at least for now, to lay off some police officers. But the story notes that other towns, which take the money and run, so to speak, water companies often increase the rates. And so the water customers there face those ever escalating rates because of state laws that allow private companies not only to recoup the cost of repairs and upgrades to the water system, but also to make a profit. So, it might sound like a tale of cronied up greed all around. I mean, the city government wants quick cash typically because they've outspent their tax base, and they often need that quick cash to fund the cushy pensions that they've promised to government employees. The private companies are taking advantage of the city's distress by waving a wad of Franklins under their nose. And then, of course, the whole scheme is made possible by a state legislature that passes enabling legislation at the state level, no doubt influenced by lobbyist dollars, campaign contributions from the aforementioned private water companies. So, Stephen Green, no matter how much of a small government guy you are, can't you see how important it is to keep something as crucial as water distribution in the hands of we the people?
I keep hearing that argument that, it's so important, we have to make the government do it. Hey, please, no, anything but that. Look, the only thing worse maybe than the government doing something is when the government stops doing something. Let me give you an example of what I mean. A couple of years ago, the city of Chicago decided to privatize their parking meters. They sold off the parking meter business, essentially, to a private firm for, it was 50 or 75 years. I can't remember which. The story, as I said, is 2-3 years old now. They gave up the rights to their own parking meter revenue for 50 or 75 years in exchange for a lump sum that they spent in 3 weeks.
Oh, my God.
I mean, this is big government run amok, and you have to believe, you have to just know it in your heart that this being Chicago, that they sold this off to a firm that was very well connected with Rahm Emanuel or one of his cronies. So this is a crony example of the government getting out of a business because it's broke and needs the money up front. But it's like getting in bed with Tony Soprano. It really is. On the other hand, if we're talking basic utilities like water and electricity, we have a system in place in municipalities all around the country where it is private. It's heavily regulated, of course, because we tend to do that with something essential like water and electricity. We want to make sure that everybody is able to get this essential of life. But the idea of saying it's important, therefore it must be run by government, is one of the ugliest and least American concepts out there. And they've been using it for healthcare to try and get us a single payer. And if we fall for it for water, we'll probably fall for it for our healthcare too.
Bill Whittle, can we just be honest for once and say that isn't this, just for the first time on this show, isn't this where our utopian libertarian principles about so-called free markets meet their true test and are found wanting? I mean, after all, do you really want to pay more for your tap water?
This is first of all, I don't drink tap water. And I bathe in champagne, as we all know, thanks to the members here at BillWhittle.com. There's the problem with this phenomenon is it's a halfway house. So I think that private ownership of public utilities is better than public ownership for precisely the reason that Stephen Green just gave. Precisely the reason. We're going to give up 75 years of revenues for a lump sum that we're going to spend in 3 weeks. Government is a spending, all levels of government, this is a great example, are spending addicts. It's not their money. They'll spend whatever they have, and when they're out of money, they'll start selling off their assets in order to have more money to spend, which they'll spend in a weekend, and then they'll be needing more money because those revenues are gone. You can't do worse than having it in the hands of government. You simply can't. So to that degree, I'm definitely in favor of privatizing utilities. But the problem is that a private utility is by definition not really a private company. It's not a free market. The way that this system ideally would work, and I understand there are technical problems with this, needless to say, would be that if a private company bought the water supply for Los Angeles, and then there were 5 different companies competing for the rights to put water into my house, then we would have actual free market competition. We'd have the benefits of the system we believe in. We'd have company A that's charging too much for water. Company B says, well, we've got a plan here. It's a $49 a month plan, and for this you get this much water and you get it this much cleaner and so on. Then the other company'd have to beat them and so on. You get down to the bare bones minimum of what does it cost to supply water at a rate which is sustainable, which is a word that the government lovers love, but which they simply don't understand at all.
So it would be like cable companies, but the cable companies can put their own satellites up. However, water companies can't create their own aquifer.
That's right.
It's called a natural monopoly.
That's right, and you had the same problem too with cable companies in terms of not everybody. You can't put in 50 different cable lines.
Yeah.
So you have a real problem here. I suppose you want to talk about utopianism. Utopianism. That's what I get for talking about utilities on this show. Utopianism would be what we actually had for a while, which is we had, I think, for a century or two in this country, we had responsible civic government that was accountable, that spent more or less as much money as it had. This is before progressivism came on the scene. You had people they counted themselves as now I hope everybody's sitting down, and I know for you young kids it's going to be leaving you scared and confused, but they considered themselves guardians of the public trust. And I know, I can see the puzzled look on your face. Of the common weal, yes. The people who would go into things like water management would do so because they felt like water was important for their community. And the idea of them spending money for the water supply on their own personal retirement fund would have been abhorrent to them. It's because they're better people. And as virtue disappears, rules replace them. And as rules disappear, then corruption replaces that. And that's where we are today. So since we are where we are today, I'm in favor of companies taking over these water supplies because they will put money into them. And of course, the final thing to say about this is the public utilities have been run by government for so long and are in such terrible shape that when they sell them to private utilities are going to have to do the repairs that decades of public neglect have left. And that's going to cost money, and people are going to go, those damn corporations are bleeding us dry. The idea that those damn governments were the ones that put us into this situation in the first place doesn't get through to most people.
Hey, Bill, this will interest you. I just thought of a solution to the highway congestion problem in Los Angeles. You want to hear it?
Sure.
Charge people what the water is actually worth, and that place will be a ghost town.
Well,
cheers.
This is far from a theoretical argument for me. About 4 years ago, when I was a county commissioner in Pennsylvania, I actually had to vote on a request from our regional public water authority, which was accountable to the Board of Commissioners, to enable it to bid on taking over the water system for Allentown, Pennsylvania. They wanted to float a bond to buy the water system in Allentown. And to do so, they had to have an extension to their charter out to 50 years, as Steve was indicating earlier, because they were making a 50-year commitment, so they had to exist for at least 50 years. So I voted with the majority on the board against granting the extension to their charter, noting that the city of Allentown was simply ignoring its real problems and trying to shift its irresponsible spending to the residents of the surrounding suburbs in the form of higher water rates. Unfortunately, the majority, even though we voted as such, did not prevail in this issue. Well, I went back and did a little Google search today and found that last year the Regional Water Authority filed suit against the city of Allentown, claiming that politicians there had misstated revenue numbers for years, with the result that the Water Authority was in jeopardy over the bonds that it had floated for the purchase of the water system. If there's any risk in privatizing water systems, it's assumed by the private companies that choose to bid, and ultimately by the water customers who've been deceived for decades, as Bill points out. A competitive market will reveal the true cost of goods and services, but the revelation can be painful. Nevertheless, keeping such services in government hands merely delays and intensifies the pain. For Bill Whittle, Stephen Green, and the Right Angle team, thank you for your membership at BillWhittle.com.